with the electoral process, completely illegal, wrong, needs to be looked at and
to look at it, it's looking at one particular community and how they voted in that by-election.
But there's a difference between that, isn't there, and Muslim voters deciding reasonably en masse that there are certain parties that represent their interests, and they come to that view as individuals. Ethnic minority communities have always done that throughout democratic history. Why is it a problem when Muslims?
All right, so in this video, we're going to see Priti Patel get completely trapped on live TV as her glaring double standards over the recent by-election in Gorton and Denton are brutally exposed. Let's watch this together and I'll give you my thoughts at the end.
Sign of weakness.
Briefly, in other news, domestic news, lots of Labour pain in the Gorton by-election, of course, but isn't the other lesson of that by-election that if you want to oppose this government from the right in seats in urban northern England and similar, that you vote for a party getting 27% of the vote, i.e. Reform, not a minor party status in seats like this, yours, with 2%?
So I think we have to remember that that particular constituency was Labour's sixth most safest seat. You know, we were not contenders in that by-election at all. The real issue about that by-election, the real story, is just the fact that people have lost faith in this government and in Keir Starmer. He's got no authority whatsoever.
No faith in you in their place.
I've made it quite clear to you that is not a Conservative seat where we were in contention. It is Labour's.
You should do better in it.
It was Labour's sixth safest seat. So on that basis alone, it was clear that it was a battle for Labour and Labour's vote. And Labour is a party of the left, and people have chosen to abandon.
And if you're on the right,
Party.
if you're on the right, which 27% of the people in that constituency are, they turn to Reform and not you.
Well, I don't know how you can describe Reform. I'm not here to be a commentator on Reform.
They're a party of the right, aren't they?
I'm telling you now. Well, they
got lots of your ex-colleagues in for a start.
Well, they voted with Labour on on various issues such as welfare and the two-child cap. So I don't think they can.
You don't think they're a party of the right?
They can't associate themselves with the Conservative Party.
No, they don't want to do that.
So look, the reality is that we were not in contention in that seat, and it was Labour's sixth most safest seat. So this is obviously a crisis in the Labour Party.
Your leader released a statement in the aftermath of that by-election where she described, quote, Labour created the monster of the Muslim community bloc vote. What did she mean by that?
Well, she was pointing out to the sectarian voting that is clearly now taking place.
Why is it sectarian?
On the basis that it was very much targeted at particular... I mean, if you look at some of the tactics that the Green Party have used and all the rest of it, and the fact now that potentially the Electoral Commission are looking into the voting trends and patterns that took place in that constituency, Lewis, we should be concerned about that.
We should,
we live in a democracy, and that should be looked at. So I don't think we can overlook that issue whatsoever.
No, nor should we. But aren't, Dame Priti, those two quite distinct things? Obviously, if there's been any interference with the electoral process, completely illegal, wrong, needs to be looked at and stamped out.
To look at it, it's looking at one particular community and how they voted in that by-election.
But there's a difference between that, isn't there, and Muslim voters deciding reasonably en masse that there are certain parties that represent their interests, and they come to that view as individuals. Ethnic minority communities have always done that throughout democratic history. Why is it a problem when Muslims do it?
Primarily in this particular case, because it's specific to this particular by-election, I think we should just recognise that.
Camille was talking about something that happened more historically than that. She's talking about Labour created the monster of the Muslim community bloc
because, of
vote.
course, they have recently, clearly been playing the Muslim community in terms of securing their own electoral base.
You mean targeting the Muslim community?
Their politics, when it comes, look at the politics in their own
But
party.
your party has, for example, targeted British Indian voters in recent elections. Why is that any different?
No, that's a choice for them in terms of how they vote. We're not telling them how to vote.
But that's a choice for Muslims, how they vote.
I think in this by-election it was very particular, and I think now that there are going to be potential investigations by the Electoral Commission.
This is a video that to the 2019 election that your then colleague Shalish Vara put out aimed specifically at British Indian voters.
देश को आज बचाना है कुछ करके हमें दिखाना है तो वोट करो बोरिस जॉनसन वोट करो बोरिस जॉनसन ब्रिटेन के पीएम बनेंगे बोरिस जॉनसन
Conservatives, British Indians. Is that sectarian?
That is part of an election campaign, a national election campaign that all political parties
And that's
do.
what the Green Party were doing, targeting
I'm
Muslim
sure
voters.
you could have shown the one for the Labour Party that they probably ran in that election, and other
I'm not
political
saying
parties
it's
as well.
improper, but your leader is saying there's something improper about
Lewis,
targeting particular communities.
We should absolutely say in this instance, this could potentially be looked at by the Electoral Commission in terms of voting patterns within the Muslim community. That is something not to be dismissed or taken lightly.
I'm not
and I think
dismissing
on that basis, until we see further details, which are now being questioned, the Labour Party has clearly been targeting, and we saw that during the last general election against the Gazan independents, and we know that they're incredibly insecure now as a political party, and they have been targeting the Muslim vote through their own national policies, such as Palestine two-state solutions.
Different votes. Historically, the Jewish vote, Indian vote.
It has changed, Lewis. It has changed. You've seen that. You've seen that since the last general election, and the way the Labour Party in particular have been behaving around Gaza and their own voter base. And I think that was tantamount and paramount in this particular by-election.
One final thing.
And let's break down the rank hypocrisy of the Conservatives and the hard right that we just witnessed. They're making a massive hysterical deal out of the Green Party campaigning on issues that resonate with Muslim voters in the Gorton and Denton by-election, trying to paint it as though it's some sinister, improper plot that demands an Electoral Commission investigation. But how is it playing community when the Greens do it, but just standard campaign practice when the Tories literally produce targeted campaign videos specifically for British Indian voters? Why is it a democratic right for one demographic to vote in their interest, but a threat to democracy when Muslims do exactly the same thing? And, if you look at the entire history of Reform UK and the Conservatives, their whole pitch is to old people or the richest voters in the country, whether that be the billionaires or, again, the over 65s. And what's funny is the white population in Gorton and Denton is actually 57%. So the majority of the electorate there is white. So why is the right wing acting as though a minority demographic somehow hijacked the entire democratic process? The numbers don't even support their outrage. So it's just transparent fear-mongering because voters chose a party that actually listened to them and seemed to care about their interests rather than any of the right-wing parties, particularly Reform. Let me know your thoughts in the comments and hit the like and subscribe button for more.